Some of you have stuck with us the entire time. Many of you catch us live. The rest of you get us later. That's okay. Whenever you can is the best time to catch the show. I appreciate you doing it. Today, Biden's loan forgiveness program. Uvalde Police Chief Pete Arredondo fired. And California has proposed no more sales of gas-powered vehicles by 2035. We'll touch on them all with quick takes. Again, today on the Divided States of America show.
Welcome to the Divided States of America show, where your host, Marlon Gardenera, takes on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We'll sort through the best and worst of politics and culture, asking questions and looking for answers that our two-ring, two-party circus has failed to provide. And here is your host, Marlon Gardenera.
Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. This is a passion project. People said, hey, get back on radio. The schedule isn't great. I've got other commitments. I've got other priorities. Start a podcast. Podcasting sounds good. Let's go live. Make it more interesting. Make it more topical. Make it more timely. See how it all works out. Still working out those kinks. I will continue to do that until I'm comfortable that I can press all the buttons, gather the information I need to gather, and present it in a way that is both entertaining and informative and worth engaging is probably the most important part. As we grow the show, add people, add guests, what you think is going to be far more important than what I think. Right now, you get to hear a lot about what I think, but it does give me the ability to hone my voice again. I was a former conservative talk radio host, a former conservative Republican. I thoroughly enjoyed that time in my life, but things have changed. So I have a different perspective. If there were a political party for centrists, I would be all over it. You all know the Forward Party is come forward. Their motto, again, it gets me every time. I love even just saying it. Not left, not right, but forward. They don't have me as a card-carrying member just yet. There's a lot of things that I think need to be worked out and understood. But the principle and idea that our two-party, two-ring circus fails to perform, it fails to meet the needs of most Americans. They work really hard to please the people that will keep them in power, will keep their party in power. And I understand. I understand leverage. I understand associating with things that you think will benefit you long-term. I understand having to choose one side versus the other. But I think we're better than that. And I think we can develop and figure out for ourselves better ways to exist with all Americans as opposed to trying to make it better for some. The all or nothing approach I always talk about. Each side wants it all, and I hope they get nothing. I wish they would sit down, talk to each other, and figure out what the best way to help as many Americans as possible versus some. Today's show certainly falls into that category. Joe Biden has finally come out with his loan forgiveness plan, and it's a for some, not all plan. It's I don't know that it's the best thing. I don't know that it's what I would do, but we'll get into that. I'll do my quick take on that, tell you the benefits, the drawbacks, tell you how the program actually works. But before we get to that, there's just the reality that in America, we've had some horrible situations. We know gun control and the thought of having it or banning guns or certain types of guns stirs up the emotions and is one of the most divisive issues in our country. I fall on the side of, you're not taking my guns. I'm going to be in position to protect my family. I don't care what the rules are. I need the ability to protect my family. However, I have strong feelings about some of the tools that we use to do it. And just as if we've just in line with the fact that we figured out how to ban grenades and you won't be going to the local gun shop to buy them, I think the line that we draw for people and what they should and shouldn't have can be redrawn based on the needs and the circumstances in our country. And in our country right now, there are a ton of AR-15s and similar guns. There are guns that are semi-automatic, automatic, large magazines. And for me, it's the theory, not the details. I'm not sitting down at the policy table trying to decide how it goes. But I do think I reflect more closely what Americans believe in that middle ground rather than left or right. That if you can kill, 25 people in a minute, it's probably something that we should reevaluate. I always talk about going to Las Vegas. They put concrete barriers between the sidewalk and the street. Where we can typically mitigate the loss of life, we do. Think about the efforts we make for drunk driving. Most people probably didn't realize approximately 10,000 people a year die as a result of drunk driving. Well, we spend a lot of time and effort to make sure that number one, got low, number two, stays low, and number three, continues to trend down. But as it relates to COVID, we lost 1 million people. We saw what the reaction was to that. But gun deaths, most of them come from handguns. Most of them come from, missing and stolen handguns. There are a lot of things we could be doing. But if we had less AR-15s, if we bought them back, if we made the penalty of having them far greater, if we considered regulating that because of the value of them in our civil society, I just haven't found anyone to give me a good explanation other than to go to the Second Amendment, and I understand their argument, although that will be debated for a long time. I'm talking about humans. I'm talking about what the people of America actually want. Well, AR-15 was used in Uvalde. We understand the number of people that were killed, the children, the teachers, the impact on that community. We understand the police response. We understand that they stood outside for a long time. We understand multiple agencies were involved. We understand parents were willing to go in and police kept them from doing it. I don't want to relive all of the details of that horrific event in Texas. But I will say that the man that most people held responsible for it, Pete Arredondo, has finally been fired 3 months to the day after the killing in Uvalde. He was let go. Accountability is critical. We know the left and right have different opinion on government, but if you are a government servant, a public servant, and you're doing your best, the training is available, the resources are available. We stand behind you to do everything you can. And I recognize there are some really incredibly difficult situations that people get in. But the point of that is accountability still is a critical piece of who we are and how our government rebuilds trust or maintains what trust it has in the people. The police are one of those unique ones. When you need them, you trust them. When something goes wrong or you feel like there's a pattern of things going wrong, you have questions like everybody else and you want those questions answered. And throughout our history, for various groups in our country, many people have felt like those questions were never answered. And only recently, there were answers to some of the questions that were really harming American people. And you always have to question the patriots. There are people who love their country, but they don't seem to speak up or stand up when others in their country are struggling. Now, take that full circle. There are people calling for the defunding of the FBI because of their raid on Mar-a-Lago. And I'm sure there are other things that motivate people to question the government and the agencies. But we certainly know there was a much louder call when one individual had a tough time dealing with law enforcement and the Department of Justice. I still will repeat, where were those same people when a whole group of Americans were wondering and questioning the same thing? But another subject, another day. Pete Arredondo, the police chief, Uvalde, who was theoretically the person in charge, and not theoretically, typically the first agency that gets there and the commander for that first agency has the scene, they become the incident commander, and it took far too long to go in and stop the killing of young children and teachers. So I'm for government accountability when it can happen. Now, the government sometimes steps in and has the potential to go too far. I don't know that America is exactly in line where the state of California, and most people never are. California is progressive. California often leads the way in liberal causes. I live in California. Because I want the middle ground, I can tell you things like San Francisco politics makes me nervous. It makes me uncomfortable. The lengths that people in that particular region would go to have the government impact and control more of what happens in America just makes me uncomfortable. And I don't know that it meets the mainstream path of America, but if it's good for that region and those people, they get a say, they get a vote, and the outcomes of what they decide will be clear for that region. For America as a whole, the divided states of America, as we fight back and forth, left and right, I want something in the middle, but that mainstream has to speak up. I don't know where the mainstream is on the idea of no longer selling gas-powered vehicles, as California is proposing, by 2035. Literally, 2035, no more gas-powered vehicles sold in California. Now, I don't know if that means you can buy them in Arizona and bring them over. The details all need to be worked out, but this is about that theory. My feeling on climate change is I'm not a climate change expert. And oftentimes the people complaining the most about climate change are people in power who are trying to hold on to it and clinging to fossil fuels, people in areas where oil is a part of their economy. And I understand that that's critical for them. But the transition has to occur, and the impact of climate change is just going to be so obvious at some point that for the people who kick the can down the road, they're going to be paying the price. It will be curious if they're still around what excuses they'll use about why they didn't take responsibility earlier, why they didn't step up and do something earlier. But oftentimes politicians are gone and don't have to face the music for anything. But for those that are there, we bring up their comments from the past and we say people have changed. So they're able to stand on that. What really has to happen is more Americans have to be concerned about other Americans. Oftentimes the ones who are complaining the most about climate change, calling it a hoax, not thinking it's a reality, aren't impacted by it. But if the most recent heat waves are a indicator of what's to come, I bet people will start paying attention. When farmers start having serious problems with droughts and the cost of food goes up and people can actually pinpoint it back to climate change, it'll be interesting to see what the discussion is then. So the idea that we need to start a transition is good. The transition would be better if more Americans were behind it, if more Americans appreciated the fact that other Americans, and I don't mean minorities, I don't mean women, I mean other Americans in different regions of our country, are already starting to pay the price. Our lack of concern, our me the people approach damages us all in the long term. If anything else, the Divided States of America show is going to be here to try to talk about those issues, thoughtful, respectful discussions about things that will impact you, whether you're willing to debate it, discuss it, think about it, talk about it, or not. And if, again, the idea of power and being able to keep it at bay is your goal, and you want the all or nothing approach, no change, it's not going to happen. Likewise, for the climate change people, I do not want you to get everything you want today. It is a transition. It is a process that would be much better served if we were all a part of it. But I'm showing this picture of California. I think it's California. I didn't vet that part. I'm showing you this picture of traffic, which looks very much like California. It's why people who live south of Los Angeles complain about Los Angeles and don't want to go. It's the 10 freeway from LA to Houston and all the way through to Louisiana, being one of the most busy freeways in the country. This may not reduce the number of cars on the road, but the gas and the pollution from it impacts climate change. So California, leading the way as usual, for better or worse, have a super majority of people in our leadership. And I'm going to blow this up so you all can see it a little bit better. They're proposing to set a zero emission sales goal for new cars over the next 13 years. Right now, we're working and getting much closer because a lot of electric vehicles are sold in California. Part of the motivation right now could be the price of gas. And I'm sure you've all seen the Facebook meme that's out there that says it costs in 8 hours more to recharge an electric vehicle than it would to fill up your tank. That's nonsense. Please don't believe every meme you read. The people who charge overnight are slow charging. There are fast chargers. So for those people who pay by the minute to get their vehicles charged, those fast chargers, those superchargers do it in 10 to 20 to 30 minutes. So the correlation that many of you are reading on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, they're not accurate. Vet those things yourself. But the California goal is to have 35% of vehicles sold in California be electric, non-gas powered cars by 2026, 68% by 2030. Here's the reality. That transition will occur based on the market value of the vehicles purchased. Someone pulling a trailer is going to find out that the batteries wear out much sooner. People having to deal with the batteries and the repair and the cost when they go bad, those market-based things will impact the transition. What I will say for California in terms of trying to lead, setting goals moves things along faster. No goals, less progress. No goal, less progress. But it's a transition I would love to see with more Americans being involved. If they were, again, how much better off would we be as Americans if we were in things together, looking for ways to make it better, as opposed to just fighting each other, thinking I'm going to get my way, and the people who want different aren't going to get anything. California's ambitious. I don't think the country's going to be on the same timeline. I do think the impact of the market will absolutely impact the transition and change to do better as it relates to climate change. And I'll tell you, we can do worse, but the Midwest, our farmers, people in places that are dealing with heat waves now may be some of the first to deal with it in more draconian and dramatic ways. I know the Colorado River, Lake Mead, things that affect Californians are certainly motivating people as we're running out of water. So we'll see what happens. And you can even use water as an example. I live next to the Pacific. We can desalinate as much as we want. Oceans rise. I used to joke, well, just desalinate the ocean and bring the volume back down. Well, the market forces make that too expensive, so we're not there yet. But Setting a goal will get us on that road. And again, I'd like more people to be discussing and a part of the transition. If they were, I think we'd all be better off. Next up, everybody has heard of this. If you're listening to the news, if you're fortunate enough not to listen to the news, but you've chose to listen to this show, thank you. I'm not here as a journalist to regurgitate the news, but there are divisive things that are going to impact Americans. And boy, is loan forgiveness one of them. Joe Biden announced yesterday that he was going to forgive $10,000 to $20,000 worth of loans for people making less than $125,000 a year, $250,000 for married couples. The reality is, if you are a private loan recipient, this does not impact you. These are loans typically backed and or provided by the federal government. I'll show you a picture and give you a little more explanation of the people impacted. But anyone on the receiving end of getting their student debt canceled or reduced is happy. Let's talk about the benefits first. Politically, Joe Biden benefits from keeping one of his campaign promises. I have an issue with that. That promise was for his base. That promise did not reflect most Americans. It absolutely reflects people that have student debt. And I'll have to ask the question, and I'm sort of skipping to it, because here's the reality. Where does education rank in terms of your tax dollars for you? Because one of the debates could be that higher learning shouldn't be so expensive. Higher learning shouldn't be something that is primarily for people who have money and or the resources for tutors and SAT training, people who are better economically situated to consider college. I can tell you, for people who are in a different socioeconomic reality, oftentimes the word college is never spoken. It's automatically assumed it's too expensive. How would you get there? How could we pay for meals? How could we pay for tuition? The conversation doesn't happen. So the knowledge necessary to understand what is even available to people, even the loans or the grants or even the scholarships. When no one in your path has gone down that road, oftentimes you know nothing about it. Oftentimes you know nothing about it. I cannot fly an airplane. No one in my family was a pilot that I'm aware of. The discussion never came up. Could I go learn? Of course I could. Did that discussion come up? No. Again, primarily because no one in my family has gone down that road. I can't even think of any friends, at least in my childhood, whose parents were pilots where that was part of my realm of thought. Well, college is far away for a lot of people because of the cost. So the beneficiaries of college are people typically who have children of people who had already been. And the growth and the pattern of new people that are going to college still remains slow. And all of the factors that I'm talking about still exist. Well, the debt can be a burden. That debt sometimes keep people away from going to college out of fear of getting it. So I'll say this, the benefit, the political promise made by Joe Biden, and in many cases not enough, and I'll cover that as well, but the benefit for the recipients is clear. There are people paying $400, $500, $600, $700 a month for student loans that, because of the bad colleges they went to, the bogus sham colleges they went to, couldn't possibly perform. And I feel bad for those people, and I believe that's a different issue. And I hope the government did as good a job, and even individuals did as good a job suing those institutions for failing to meet their obligations so people could get rid of that debt, get rid of the burden when there was fraud committed against them. Certainly more empathetic to people in that situation. There were colleges closed down by the government because they realized they were taking government funds. They were taking people's money. People are being forced to pay back loans, again, for schools that were just illegitimate. They were just bad. And the government in those cases, in many cases, stepped in and closed them down. I understand this for those people. It was fraud. And where you can't get all of the money directly from the person who committed fraud, sometimes the government steps in. Think of the housing bubble. Don't eliminate the benefit that you may have received individually from the government when they needed to step in because of fraud, because they needed to step in to keep the economy going. I don't know that this reaches the level anywhere near to the same degree, but I do want you to keep in mind there are other times and methods where people get loan forgiveness, they get breaks, and they don't necessarily talk about them when it's someone else getting the benefit. But again, politically, a promise was made, it was kept, and I don't like promises that are just for your base. I wish that had been something also that could be negotiated so that we could target the right people with the right amount of money to give the right benefit to make America better, not just the beneficiaries of a particular political party. So just as I've come out very clearly on things from the right, I can be very clear. I wish there had been negotiation on this and it encompassed more Americans in need as opposed to the reality of the people who in many cases benefited from this. But there's more. It's the seventh freeze on loan repayment. Most of that started because of COVID, the economic impact, people not having jobs. So they froze the repayments of federally backed loans and direct federal loans. Having done that, this is now the seventh time. It goes through December 31st. Hopefully there's an indication after that we're going back to loan repayment, because we have certainly come out of the most current effects of COVID in that the job market is hot, jobs are available, wages are up. They are not matching inflation. Please, I don't want to mislead people. But there is debt that still needs to be paid, and we can't put it off forever. They are proposing a 5% cap of your total income, which I do think is a positive. The debt shouldn't kill you, particularly when you're paying us back. We don't want to put people in a position where they're in financial ruin. When they're in financial ruin, their tax base, the dollars, their contribution to us as a whole diminishes as well. So we don't want to do so much damage that they can't contribute. A 5% cap sounds like a good starting point, a good negotiating point on how we make sure that the debt doesn't swallow people and remove or eliminate their ability to be contributors to our tax base overall. But I'll repeat the question because it's important. Where does education rank in terms of your tax dollars? How important is it? How much of it should go towards it? How important should it be for people to have access to the different education resources that are available? To that same degree, should we be doing more to help people with trade schools? There's certainly been a lot of talk in social media about the value of trade schools, about the focus on people going to college at the expense of trade schools, even the pressure that people put on children to go to college when there are very good paying trade related jobs that you can get. I will always say this: the more education you can get, the better. The longer you can get an education, often to me, the better. The examples they use of educations that don't end up paying, those are far and fewer between. We know if you go to college and you get a degree, and particularly if you get advanced degrees, you're going to make significantly more over your lifetime. That's not to say that that needs to be everybody's path. It is not. People need to choose their own path in relation to what's important to them. Trade school could be it. But if you answer the question of where education ranks in terms of your tax dollars, we may find that a broader discussion with more compromise would have included relief or benefits to more people that are going to trade school and not just people going to four-year universities or accumulating a lot more debt looking for those advanced degrees. It's just the reality. But again, in terms of benefits, politically, I see the freeze, still good for people recovering from COVID, but there does need to be a point. The 5% cap on monthly payments, also something that looks more like a compromise and a starting point where a discussion can be had so that people can still pay their loans, but it doesn't, again, diminish their ability to contribute to our country as a whole. 90% of the 45 million Americans who've got a federally backed loan or a federal loan, 90% will benefit from this. 20 million borrowers must owe less than 10 million or 10,000 or 20,000, which are the two caps. So their loans will be erased completely. What that obviously means for those families, or the amount that they were giving in their monthly payments, now goes in their pocket. I can't think of any Americans who wouldn't be better off if they had more money in their pocket every 2 weeks or whenever they get paid, and that money wasn't going somewhere else. I'm not defending the value of the program. I'm just describing the benefits to the people who are in it. 45 million Americans are going to be impacted. 20 million Americans will have their loans wiped out completely because they're under the threshold amounts. Progressives wanted more. So I suppose that could be a benefit for people who don't agree with this at all. Progressives wanted 50,000 in loan forgiveness. Some wanted even more than that. Really? It's just the different places people were at. Some wanted no income caps. They wanted the benefit to go to anybody with a student loan to the tune of $50,000. I understand progressives have their agenda. They could outline to you specifically all of the benefits and reasons they think that infusion back into people's lives, not cash, but eliminating the debt, thereby giving them the ability to utilize the money they have in a different way as opposed to paying that debt. They could list out 1,000 reasons. But people in the middle and on the right could list out 1,000 reasons that $50,000 giveaways don't necessarily make sense. It may not be the prime target of our tax dollars or the benefit of that subsidy. You can call it whatever you want. Again, if we were discussing this and going after these things together, or even with a third party so that the mainstream had a policy voice as opposed to just swaying votes every 4 years for the president or swaying votes every 6 years for Senate or every 2 years for the House. It'd be better if the middle were part of the policy discussions. Again, one of the sole motivations of the Divided States of America show, which you are listening to, and I am grateful for that. We are here weekdays from noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter. Appreciate you engaging in these discussions. Today, we're talking about Biden's loan forgiveness and the reality that progressives wanted more, but a discussion with more people from the middle. I need to compromise because neither extreme gets what they want would probably make this program have been better and or deciding not to do it in favor of other ways and places we think the targeted dollars of relief from the government should go. But again, progressives wanted more. Now, some of the negatives, some of the obvious negatives. Others had to pay their loans back. It's that simple. You see posts everywhere. Does that mean I'll be getting a rebate since I paid my loan back? What makes them better than me in terms of what the priority is of who should get money and for what? If they wanted to go to college, they should be paying it back. Why is that my problem? Why is that my responsibility? Bloomberg, who was very critical of this in an editorial, said it could have been worse if progressives have gotten what they wanted. But there are a lot of people speaking very loudly about the negative impacts of this. Could it impact inflation for people to have $400 or $500 more a month in their pocket? Certainly, they can use that money to spend. The only thing I would say, as you consider people having a little bit more money in their pocket, is wages haven't gone up as much as inflation, so people are still behind. It's not as if it's a spending spree that takes people from being in poverty to middle class or middle class to upper middle class or upper middle class to being rich. That's not the reality of the value of the student loans. But it is going to provide relief and a catch-up in many ways for people whose wages haven't met inflation. Could it have an impact when inflation comes down and people have the excess dollars in terms of slowing the reduction of inflation? It could. These are macroeconomic things that people pinpoint as if there's any absolute certainty, and there isn't. But for the people who get it, again, that benefit of having more dollars in their pocket on a month-to-month basis is going to be clear. For the people who had to pay their loans and didn't get the relief, they're looking at it as an inequity. I don't love the I didn't get it, so you can't either. It's a little unfortunate. There's going to be millions of times in life that someone had it better than you. Thinking we're always going to get it retroactive is sort of silly. That's why I don't scream for reparations for descendants of slavery. I would take equality. I would take equal justice. I would take a lot of things as a form of reparations for ills done to various groups of people and not just cash. It's hard to make up for the ills of the past with cash for everybody because there have been enough ills in this country that we just don't have enough money. Still the greatest nation in the world, but there have been ills in our country and we don't spend enough time addressing them. We tend to align with our parties and ignore it if we don't think it's in our personal me interest. Nonetheless, 2/5 of the people getting this, 42% that would get this $10,000 to $20,000 off, are the wealthiest Americans. 2/5, 42% of the beneficiaries of this. And this is what they consider to be a negative. If it were targeted, people with the means and it not doing as much damage or impact to their family, their lives, their income. Excuse me. I don't think I have long COVID, but boy, I've never shaken this cough. But the wealthiest Americans, people in the best position to afford paying these loans, is one way to measure who we think should get them, who benefits the most, who is harmed the most. But 2/5 of the people getting these are wealthy. 1/5 of the people getting it are the bottom 12%, people in poverty. So again, if you're looking at the balance, the impact to the economy, $400 a month to a wealthy person isn't going to change much of anything. It's real money. I'm not denying that they could do good things with it. I'm not denying they could reinvest it. I'm not denying it could go to an employee. I'm not denying that it could have value in the economy. But $400 a month to the people in the bottom 5th of our economy, it is a little different impact. Again, if we were having discussions about the benefits, we wouldn't have these outcomes. If we weren't trying to please one party, the outcome would affect and impact more people. If we weren't doing the all or nothing, which is some people saying don't give them anything versus give them everything, America would be better. That's why I want the middle to speak up. I want the middle in the policy discussions. Some people are saying it's going to reduce funding to K through 12. I don't know that they'll spend enough money that there's a direct correlation between the two, but there's always the discussion about the prioritization of tax dollars, which is going to bring me back to this question for the third time. When we grow the audience and we are more engaged, we'll be getting lots of answers. Where does education rank in terms of your tax dollars? We all accept that we participate in the public school process. We all accept the fact that we participate in the state-funded college process. We understand there are a list of programs where there are a list of beneficiaries. Where does education rank? How much of your income would you be willing to invest in income, and what would the outcomes be? Where would the dollars go? What do the average person think? Not just the politicians playing the political games and the partisanship. What would the people want, or what would that look like if we were in the center of that actual debate? Keep in mind the fear of reduction in K through 12. Biden wanted to invest quite a bit more in the education of young children, making TK just a part of our educational system. There was resistance and pushback from the other side. So it's not as if that wasn't a priority of the Biden administration, but the impact of the spending here and taking it from somewhere else is something that absolutely has to be considered. Other fears. People will have hope of future loan forgiveness and take bigger loans. Some people are as frugal and responsible as they can. They take exactly what they need. They get part-time jobs. And then there are people who take loans big enough to survive while they're focusing on their studies. I'm not here to decide or judge what should or shouldn't happen for those individuals, but the concern of potential future loan forgiveness or it becoming in any way a standard part of the process could keep a reduction in tuition from happening if the institutions believe loan funding is going to be readily available, or if people are willing to take larger loans because of loan forgiveness. Just potential negatives, things people are throwing around and discussing in terms of the negative impacts of this. Now, Bloomberg, I said it could have been worse, but they said it was a horrible mistake. Editorial piece, an opinion piece. Said it has a potential to undermine the commitment to financial discipline. Listen, financial discipline in government sounds like a silly thing. If this were the difference between our deficit and funding and spending and responsibility, that would mean more. I don't know the total impact of this long term. I do know that the dollars people save will go back into the economy. They do have a value. Has to be offset against inflation. But when it impacts the people at the bottom, those dollars get recycled. They get recycled very quickly. So the money could come back to the federal government, or it can go into the economy. Federal government's going to get a piece of it, maybe not as much, but the dollars don't just disappear. But this idea that this undermines the commitment to financial discipline, I'm guessing there's a few thousand other places we could point to about financial discipline and not just use this one, although this one, I agree, could impact that in a way. Catering to elites. The fact that much of the dollars, 2/5 of them, are going to impact people that have more money, I would say that kind of falls in line with college as a whole. College is a place, in many cases, for people with more money. Elites were doing things like paying schools off and getting fake sports scholarships. Elites tend to work things out to make sure that their children get the best. People that have far less tend not to have the same resources, the same ability to do all of the things people on top can. So the fact that this is beneficiary to the elites is kind of in line with our system that primarily benefits the elites and the number of people going to college and the people getting student loans while they're there. It's kind of consistent with our way of doing things. But designed to benefit them, I don't think that was the sheer design of it. I don't believe that was the sheer design. A moral hazard. Take loans, don't have to pay them back. I've got some thoughts on that. Got some real thoughts on that. Really. And making higher education less affordable. I touched on that just briefly. If more loans are available, some of these institutes of higher learning may not feel as compelled to lower tuition or make school more affordable. Now, let's take a quick look at the plan. His student loan debt plan includes forgiving debt, $20,000 if you went to a college on Pell Grants, $10,000 if you didn't receive Pell Grants. You receive Pell Grants based on your income. So essentially, if you had already received the benefit of government assistance via the Pell Grants, they believe that you might be in a different financial situation. So the loan forgiveness can be up to $20,000. If you didn't receive Pell Grants, your income was better, your family's income was better at the time, it's $10,000. Forgiveness only applies to those earning less than $125,000. Again, $250,000 for married couples. And student loan repayment was paused and extended one final time through December 31st of 2022. The payment is based on income. If you have an undergraduate loans, you can also cap repayment at 5% of your monthly income. That's the thrust of the plan. Now, here's the reality for the people talking about it. The federal government gives away all sorts of money, and they prioritize all the time who they think deserves it. Look at the Paycheck Protection Program. $800 billion was given out. And I'm not coming out against or for it. I'm saying that the discussion of what would be more beneficial as we as a nation fought against COVID, as opposed to dividing not only left and right, but dividing 50 ways by 50 states. Had we been united instead of this divided states, had we discussed how we get more testing, how we get more solutions rather than throwing money out, we wouldn't have spent $800 on paycheck protection. Although I value the impact of paycheck protections, there are companies that I know were paying people to do nothing. It was almost just an alternate form of unemployment insurance, just being paid out a different way. It came from the CARES Act, from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It's just the reality of where we were at that time. I don't agree with all of the things that happened, but boy, if the middle had been discussing it, we all would have been better off. But correlate the $800 billion being offered here to the student loans and who was impacted, how they were impacted, and the reality behind the fact that from the U.S. Small Business Administration, 94% of the PPP loans that were approved in 2020 had been forgiven by December of 2021. Loan forgiveness is not a new thing for students. The impacts and benefits, whether the progressives should have got more or whether these people shouldn't have got anything, always check yourself and ask, I can't stand these kids getting these rebates. Did you get a PPP loan? Did it get forgiven? Just trying to put it in perspective. And that perspective, if we had been talking to a broader spectrum of Americans, might have had a different outcome. Just the reality of where we are. Here's that plan. You can't see it. I just described it. Here's the $800 billion PPP loans. It was there. It was real. It was a part of what Americans contributed to. The money didn't fall out of the sky. The debt has to be repaid. Taxpayers are on the hook for all of it. And again, the 94% of PPP loans that were approved by 2020 had already been forgiven by December of 2021. It's just the reality in America. These things happen all over the place. Let's not act like they don't. Let's not act like it's not a part of how we live. Did you know 413,000 bankruptcies in America last year? That number was actually down, but 413,000, where the average amount of $240,000 in debt was forgiven. I'm only saying this because we are so divided and people lose perspective. I'm only saying this because if you're the beneficiary of it, you love it. But there are people out there who've been the beneficiary of far greater loan forgiveness. And they're going to use every justification they can. It was allowed. It was available. It's part of the Constitution. Bankruptcy. There are a list of things. There are people, and I'll break it down even simpler. The mortgage interest tax deduction. Why are Americans involved in how much interest you have to pay? So when you take a really broad perspective, the PPP loans and the number of people they affected, bankruptcies, mortgage interest deduction rates, there are people screaming that this is the most ridiculous thing in the world who get far greater benefits annually. America, put it in perspective. America, be more fair. America, be better. We are divided and it doesn't lead to someplace good. We're not better off as a result of arguing with each other to the point where we can't hear each other and we stop talking. That's the point of the Divided States of America show. Those are the discussions I want to have. Respectful, thoughtful. I want to talk to people of both sides. I want a third party. I want there to be other people that need to be negotiated with as we discuss policy, not just the left and right. I want America. And I likely won't stop until I feel like there's enough of us having enough conversations that at least we know someone's speaking up for us. If that has to be you and me, let's do it. That's the point of the Divided States of America show, which you are listening to. We are here noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Twitter. Share with friends. Like our page. We will relaunch and reach more people real soon. Working out the kinks, having a good time. It is a passion project. I am grateful that I had the time and ability to do it. I enjoy doing it every day, and in part, It's because of how appreciative I am of you for doing it with me. Thank you for tuning into the Divided States of America show. We'll be back with more tomorrow, unless we take that Friday off. We'll see. Thank you. I'm your host, Marlon Gardenera. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the Divided States of America show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel and share this video with your family and friends.